Thank you again, Rachel. Well, there. Okay, I should be here. Am I heard okay? Fine. Good morning, and I'm just going to start by saying it's been far too long since I've had the pleasure of speaking with you here. And it seems particularly long, given all the seismic changes that we've gone through with our country and with our world. And I would say that our world is definitely a changed world, into a brave new world, perhaps. And I'm not so sure about my bravery anymore, especially now in the aftermath of the election. I feel we're on the edge of falling into a dictatorship. I truly feel that. But I'm here today to offer hope through a call to active prayer. Yes, you heard right, in the Unitarian Universalist Church prayer. And we'll talk a lot about that. And a renewal of our UU community. One of the most cogent descriptions about how I feel after the election is this, from Common Dreams columnist Abby Zimet. She wrote it on behalf of the entire Common Dreams team. It summarizes nicely my feelings and my fears about where we are with our country. And I add, I heartily endorse Common Dreams, the organization's purpose, since it correlates so well with our deep UU values. They're the common good and the organization. Common good, the organization seeks to, quote, inform, to inspire, to ignite action for the common good. And I hope we can do that this morning here as well. Here are some of Abby's words. It's been almost 3 months since the election, but damn, it still hurts. Within 24 hours of Trump's whim, women were facing crass hate campaigns, echoing the venom of white supremacist Nick Fuentes. Your body, my choice, forever. She writes, there will be further attacks on working people, the poor, immigrant communities, trans kids, anti-war voices, political dissenters, champions for social justice, climate campaigners, the free press, every kind of other that you can imagine. We're facing vicious mass deportations and chaos for millions, massive tax giveaways to the ultra-wealthy and corporations, pardons for insurrectionists, and savage attacks on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. In short, I think attacks on the very fabric of our American life. But she writes, but while institutions have failed us, the corporate media, the Supreme Court, academia, the political parties, we cannot fail each other. And now is the time to get to work, she wrote, to go on offense and to fight. And whew, that's really almost an overwhelming amount of trouble that we face as a nation. But this accounting is just for our domestic affairs. There's nothing on this list about Ukraine, the reemergence of dictatorial and brutal Russian empire builders, the ascendancy of autocracy, and billionaire oligarchs across the globe. Nothing at all about Israel, Gaza, Hungary, Iran, Sudan, Jordan, China, or nuclear-tipped missiles in India and Pakistan and North Korea. And nothing about economics, about global warming, overpopulation, famine, and pandemics. And nothing at all, nothing whatsoever about our president turning into a traitor, formally allying himself with tyrants around the world at the United Nations, and betraying our true friends, the allied liberal democracies of the world. All of this, in my view, continues to increase the likelihood of nuclear war. We're going to talk about that at some length this morning, especially with the nuclear codes in the hands of a cruel, incompetent, and sociopathic U.S. president and cabinet. I also note that the Union of Atomic Scientists Doomsday Clock, which is reset every January, was set for all of 2024 at 90 seconds before the midnight of global doom. It's now set for 2025 at just 89 seconds. Scant time left before nuclear midnight. And with all this, awake people everywhere have every reason to feel depressed, despondent, tired and overwhelmed. So what are we to do to preserve our democracy, to uphold our common decency, our sanity, and even our politics? And what must we do to pull ourselves back from the nuclear, ecological, personal, and climatological brinks that we all face? Again, we cannot fail each other. Now is the time to get to work, to go on offense, to fight. Now, I feel that we must fight, since failing to fight all of this is acquiescence, a traitorous rejection of what we UUs hold most dear about our chosen faith and about ourselves. It'll be a long fight. We must be resilient and take care of ourselves. We must enjoy our lives to be able to fight on in the succeeding days. So how do we do that? Where do we get perseverance? How do we not fall into the trap of doing evil to fight evil and thus perpetuating evil? Well, I think our answer lies in community, that we must strengthen each other. We must become closer friends with each other, see each other more often, spend more time with each other. The time has come to take our community building seriously, and we must learn to pray better. This, too, is one of the key builders of community. Praying, huh? Such a difficult subject for us UUers. Especially for me. I'm an atheist, humanist, pantheist. My first wife, mother of two of my children, was from a biblical literalist family who prayed at every meal, several times, most days, both publicly and privately, and more on Sundays with 2 long services, longer than what we'll have here today. And any time there was a funeral or a birth or a baptism, they all got together. They wanted their church to be their family. They wanted to be close. Now, I believe this is the real strength of right-wing Christian nationalist strength. Their strength lies not in their God, as they think, but I think it lies in their community, in their church and family bonds. We'll talk about it a little more. But praying? So really, what do I think about praying? Now, I really came to learn through that experience of living with those people, it really is very important. But unfortunately, it repulses most of us UUs because it is so terribly misdirected. So we must, in my opinion, redefine and redirect praying. Now, the first step is to stop praying to somebody or something else, to intercede for us in some situation, because it's clear to me that he, she, or it isn't really there and cannot directly help us. Yet I do think we should pray meditatively with ourselves and for others. Why do I say this? Because I feel prayer really has power, which we UUs really need. So to reclaim that power, prayer is best understood as expressing our most fervent wish for the best for every being, including ourselves, in a Buddhist sense. It's starting a conversation with our hearts. And I think we must aim and say our prayers to each other at real physical responsive beings and things, not some vague supernatural thing. I think we must concede that whatever power there is in prayer, that power comes from us, not from some ethereal, passive force that's over us, in which I do not believe. Prayer's power is our power and our strength, and it builds our community. Our prayer cannot be passive, but must be active and muscular with the strength of our bodies, compassionate with the strength of our love, and well thought out, directed by the power of our intellects individually and collectively. And lastly, I think authentic prayer must be rooted in and inspired within us strength and a resolve for action in ourselves and in our community. Then prayer can truly help. Just as an example, consider the traditional serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. As much as I love these words, this is a prayer I cannot pray because it is fundamentally misdirected towards a power or being in which I do not believe. And it's so passive. Where is our human agency in this prayer? I think a better directed version would be, friends, help me to find the serenity to accept things that I cannot change. Friends, help me to find the courage sufficient to change the things that I can change. And friends, help me to find wisdom enough to know the difference. And also I consider our good old UUFLB service-ending prayer song, Let There Be Peace on Earth. I feel it's similarly misdirected from its very first word. It's beautiful, and I love the lyrics, but to whom or what are we pleading? Who or what will simply just let peace happen, as is requested? Frankly, it's bothered me for years, this song. And if I can be a little bit presumptuous and change the words, here's what I'd come up with. How about, I'll work for peace on earth, etc. Now stay tuned for this in the finale. But the revised desiderata that we spoke of works for me. This prayer is really a form of personal meditation, a deep conversation with ourselves and with others and the objects of our prayers. Through this kind of prayer, especially when said publicly, we change ourselves by admitting our weaknesses and our shortcomings. And we ask for a real friend's help and advice. And when I say or pray it in private, this kind of prayer functions to remind myself to both forgive myself, because no one is perfect, and to buck up, to focus myself, and apply myself toward a task or to a problem. Public prayer implies taking personal action of some sort. It is that commitment to action that strengthens and deepens our community. Praying works because as we pray or meditate, we learn about ourselves. We grow and change ourselves. We humble ourselves when we admit our inability to manage things on our own. We need each other's help. And by saying our personal truth out loud, we automatically create deep community bonds. Meditative praying works because my prayers change me first. And then my changes work on the others around me. As is frequently said, think globally, act locally. My friends, I want to approach the last parts of this sermon on another question. Because I think true, deep community is the key to having the strength and perseverance to fight the terrible battle for democracy that we face. And I have come very slowly, I admit, to acknowledge that properly conceived and directed prayer is a key to both that end and to improving ourselves, our spirits. But now I want to address the questions about how to avoid becoming evil while fighting evil. And why all that is happening, in the Washington MAGA rush offends us so personally and so deeply. Here I find answers in the role of our 8 precious principles and in my father's own story. I'm going to read our 8 principles, and you can follow along in the order of this. And while I read them, I'd like each of you to think of a Trumpian MAGA action that just makes you upset. Then try to settle on just one that seems to be so against our principles that it just makes you especially angry or especially upset. Just one that you to our foundational UU8 principles. So think about that as I read them. Here they are. We, the congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community, world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And finally, we covenant to support a journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community with actions to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. As you can see, this is really hard. This new age of MAGA Trumpism just infuriates and hurts us. Through abject opposition to all of the life principles that we UUs hold dear. MAGA is against every one. All of our 8 principles. And that's not even mentioning that now we have UU love as the overall wellspring of our faith and from which our principles spring. I feel that MAGA Trump is even against love and compassion. I see it in how he treats people. I'm sure that this so hurts us because we are taught and are utterly convinced that our principles align so closely with our country's founding documents, our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. It's natural to us to have an attack against our democracy and our founding documents to feel like a very personal attack on us personally. Like a personal attack against a huge part of ourselves and our chosen faith, and an attack against our community. As well as an attack against our precious country, we rightfully get so upset and very angry. But my friends, we have to be careful with our feelings. I know many people just have an innate, intense hate for MAGA Trump. And I admit, I hate just the sneer in his voice, the disdain and the contempt for others that he displays, and how he abuses difficult people. I've heard some toy with the idea of various types of violence against him to just end his evil, feeling that our country, even our world, would be so much better off without him. Hey, and it couldn't be that hard, could it? I've thought a lot about this conundrum. How can we really oppose and really fight these sorts of enemies? Now, I agree that the MAGA boss Trump is an implacable, evil enemy, but again, we need to be careful. What kind of enemy is he? Is he our personal enemy? Or do we just feel that way because of our close emotional connections to the objects of his attacks, our Constitution and our free way of life? I think that we must remember that despite our personal anger and rage, he is really an enemy of our state and not our own personal enemy. But yet he must be steadfastly opposed. In this part, I'm going to talk about my father. And we'll show some pictures from him that he took when he was a member of the occupying American Army in Japan. And he was stationed in Nagasaki 2 months after they dropped the bomb there. And we'll see some of his pictures. He was a photographer. So lately I've been thinking about armies and soldiers in the context of people who are forced to oppose and physically fight enemies of their states. How does one go to war and yet remain a caring, compassionate person? How is that possible? How do we avoid becoming what we fight against? And never having been in the military, I don't have any firsthand experience in that. But I have seen a lot of violence in my years of prison work. You'll see that's my father's unit there in Nagasaki. He's kneeling down in the center between the standing row and the kneeling row. He's just behind there. In my prison work, it's been my observation that most people who inflict violence on other people have 2 traits. First, they practice extreme othering. Their opponents or targets. They're just not like my group or gang in prisons. They're different and inferior in some way. They may look different. They may talk in another language, or they may talk in mine with an accent. They may worship differently or have different culturally influenced reactions to common situations. They may be intellectually challenged, or at least thought to be so. And this proceeds, often pushed by propaganda, to force a view of the others. They are really subhuman, just an animal and unworthy. And the perpetrator of violence can become psychologically insulated from the effects of harming or killing another human being who is inherently deserving, as is the perpetrator, to enjoy a good life. These become violent because they have lost respect for and they have othered their victims. They have no community. And there are also some types who seem to be just very sociopathic and who cannot really love another or to have empathy with them. They also cannot experience real community. I feel our MAGA boss is actually both of these. Now here's where my father comes in, and we can just flip through these pictures that are taken in the aftermath of nuclear holocaust that my father witnessed. I first saw these pictures when I was 10 years old. Here's where my father comes in. Like many of you, my father served in World War II and in Korea, and in the reserves a total of 22 years. And while he never really actually experienced active battle, he did have extensive experience with its horrific aftermath. He was part of the American occupying army in Japan and stationed in Nagasaki 2 months after the atomic bomb was dropped. You'll see writing on there. That's his writing. These were taken in November 1945. I have these few of his pictures, which I share this morning. This is what he experienced. He, like most other World War II veterans I have known, was reluctant to talk much about his experiences in Japan. But his experience there changed him profoundly. I know it did. I know it. He managed, I feel, to see the most horrific evil mankind has ever unleashed and somehow to subjugate it, to compartmentalize it, and mentally overcome it. Killing in war, my friends, is the ultimate expression of the lack of community. Back in the 1970s, I had many successful student friends who served in Vietnam and who similarly could not talk much about what they had been through. I think these folks, like my dad, had the capacity to compartmentalize their feelings about what happened to them and what they saw and what they did during war. But this so often left them scarred and led, I feel, to their difficulty in fitting in with civilian life after military service, because we civvies just couldn't understand what they had been through. I think my dad avoided this largely because he and my mother found this open, accepting, and caring UU faith into which I and my brother and sister were born and raised. Here my father could talk and express himself with others. He found personal worth and meaning in becoming a UU member, and he helped found the Ventura Church, which I grew up. He became a leader throughout the PSWD and elsewhere. He did lots of things in his long life which I now recognize all to be a continuing, lifelong effort to create community. This was his most fundamental, if unconscious, and I think it largely was unconscious, and I didn't realize it frankly, until I was working the sermon through, his unconscious and fundamental task in life to create community for people and for peace that deprives us of community. He gave my mom, gave us kids this great gift and advantage. And as I have aged, I've come to deeply understand and respect the sacrifices that he and so many others like him made. Sacrifices for the hope of building a better and peaceful world through building community among us. This is why his was the greatest generation. Friends, to conclude this rather rambling sermon, I confess that while I am still shell-shocked by the extraordinarily rapid assault on our lives and our government and our institutions by the MAGA president and his allies, I need to say this. We still need to fight it. We need to do so together so that we can talk and laugh and eat together, as we did last night, and celebrate our victories and talk frankly together, consoling and strengthening each other. But together we will, most of us, get through all of this. And I firmly say that we must follow our 8 principles and not let this battle turn us into bitter, burned-out versions of ourselves. So that even in the heat of battle, we must maintain respect for the inherent worth and dignity of all persons, even MAGA President Trump, even though we despise their actions. And we must maintain our compassion to achieve our goal of justice, equity, and community. We must not turn into our enemy, nor fail to oppose them. Our world does not need or want any more evil, and it requires more community. So to bring this all together, I will say I will reclaim and redirect prayer. It is not the exclusive property of Christian nationalists any more than patriotism is. Friends, I will pray for you to help me to be better, to have strength and wisdom, and to help in our work of UU-love, community building, and survival. And I will work to help ensure that the work of my parents for a better world will not have been in vain. I will pray to you and for you, that together we will strengthen ourselves and thus lay the groundwork to create and to perfect ourselves and our community. I will pray that together we too can change and improve ourselves and the world, at least our part of it. So, my friends, to conclude, in this age of MAGA, it is so clear that we need each other more than ever, for our own mutual and personal support, for the joy and the love that we all need. It's so clear that we really need to be close, closer than ever in our community, so that we can withstand and thrive in this coming difficult age. In that spirit, I'll end with this prayer. Friends, I pray that you will surround me and each other with steadfast love. I pray that we will share with each other our varying strengths, gifts, and resources so that we will survive and thrive together through whatever darkness the coming years may bring. And I pray that we bring each other safety and joy in a sacred, blessed, beloved community of light. My friends, we cannot fail to make community for each other. It's time to go to work now. It's time to go on offense. It's time to fight together for how we want to live our lives in community and peace. And as I always say at the end of my sermons, namaste, the holiness and hope of community that shines from each of you always kindles the holiness of hope in me. Thank you. And I pray that today each of us will be truly blessed be.